Alright guys, do not forget to hit that like and subscribe button if you're new to the channel and if you enjoyed this video. So, I'm hearing rumors that former unified heavyweight champion of the world, Andy Ruiz Jr., he might be facing Deontay Wilder's latest victim, Luis King Kong Ortiz. Apparently, Andy Ruiz was offered a fight with Dillian Whyte, and apparently he denied that fight, and Dillian Whyte is now going to be facing, I believe, Alexander Povetkin. And there's like every little piece that I'm reading on this Andy Ruiz, Luis Ortiz. The rumor is Luis Ortiz might be facing Andy Ruiz Jr. Both of these guys, if I'm not mistaken, are PBC fighters, right? Yeah, because Andy Ruiz is with the PBC, Luis Ortiz is with the PBC. So it's going to be both of those guys facing each other, supposedly. So it makes sense because they're both on the PBC, right? It also makes sense, kind of, because they're both coming off losses against the champions. Well, Ruiz was the champion going into the Joshua fight, but he lost against Joshua. So they're both coming off losses. So I actually I'm not mad at that fight if that fight does take place, because they're not bad fighters, both of these dudes, in my opinion. And they're both coming off of big fights. You know, Joshua, Ruiz losing against Joshua, Andy and Ortiz losing against. I get confused with Ruiz and Ortiz. Ortiz getting knocked out cold against freaking Deontay Wilder and his punching power. So I would think it would be redemption for both of these. Both of these guys will want to come back and win a fight. If Luis Ortiz were to beat what's his name, Andy Ruiz Jr., he could say, "Hey, I beat a former unified, not undisputed, but unified heavyweight champion of the world," and that would be the biggest thing in his resume, because that would be the best thing in his freaking resume. Who do you guys got in that fight? Their styles. Luis Ortiz, I believe he's a southpaw. His style. He has the very traditional Cuban style. Andy Ruiz is a counterpuncher. He's more of a guy that wants you to come to him so he could counter you. That's an interesting style matchup. Obviously, Luis Ortiz is much older. I think he's like a decade. Some people say he's in his 50s, so he might be 20 years. He might be 2 decades older than Ruiz. But that's Cuba versus Mexico, so that's a good style matchup. What do you guys think of this matchup? Do you guys like this matchup? Like, if this fight actually gets made, would you guys be excited to see it? I don't think it's a bad matchup, honestly. I don't know who wins that fight. A lot of people are going to say, though, probably that, Andy Ruiz ducked Dillian Whyte because, again, supposedly he turned down a fight with Dillian. He was offered a fight with Dillian Whyte. That would have been a good fight, too. Ruiz versus Dillian Whyte. But apparently he dodged it to face, Ortiz. I'm curious to know how much he's getting paid for this. Or he got paid a whole bunch of money when he fought, what's his name? Joshua. But, Luis Ortiz isn't necessarily a big draw at all or a big name at all. So he's probably going to get nowhere. He's probably going to get very little money for him. Not for me. For me, that's a lot of money. But for him, it would be little compared to how much he made against Joshua. Their styles, I'm just trying to think of their styles together. Ruiz is a tricky guy. Sometimes he plays the boxer, but sometimes he becomes very aggressive. Ruiz is not a guy who applies pressure. He's a guy who's a counterpuncher. So it'll be an interesting fight. It'll be an interesting matchup. Ruiz just got to get his conditioning together, though, because he was out of shape, completely out of shape when he lost against Anthony Joshua. He looked terrible when it came to his physique. He's always been an overweight heavyweight, but he looked even worse. Like he came in, I believe, like nearly 20 pounds heavier than he did the first time. So he really needs to get himself in good shape. Anyway, guys, let me know what you guys think of this potential matchup that supposedly is going to happen.